Arsenal resuscitate their title hopes today with a 3-1 victory at home to Liverpool. But quite possibly, the real victors of today's result did not play. Hey guys, it's your boy Izzy, here to talk about Arsenal's victory against Liverpool. But before we do that, please consider hitting that like and the subscribe button to let YouTube and everybody else know that you are enjoying this content. Now, coming into this game, Arsenal had a very poor result against Liverpool in the last time they faced. And as a matter of fact, Arsenal's return against the title challenges that are Liverpool has not been good. They've lost 4 out of their last 5 games against Liverpool at the Emirates Stadium. And Liverpool's only defeat this season was to their crosstown neighbors, Tottenham, who they hate with a passion. But even more so, it came in pretty controversial circumstances. So the reality of the fact was that Liverpool were going to be very difficult opponents today, and it was going to be very hard to beat them. But one thing that I noticed in the lead up to this game, especially as both sides took their places on the pitch and both managers shook hands and went and sat down, was Jurgen Klopp's demeanor. He let out a very nervous puff, and the nervous energy that Jurgen Klopp transmitted at that moment seemed to also conform to Liverpool's performance for the most part of the first half. But in the beginning of the game, Liverpool did look as though they had a certain intent to go at Arsenal, with the first real opportunity falling to Diogo Jota, who failed to convert his chance, which was pretty similar to the one he had against Chelsea. That would be the only opportunity that Liverpool would have in a while, and Arsenal then took control of the game after a very bright start. Arsenal were dominating, and Liverpool did not assume the position that we normally see them in with their regular direct football and intricate passing. And Arsenal were now starting to impose themselves in the game. And in the lead up to pretty much most of this game, one of the questions was Arsenal's striking force, and are they going to be potent enough to go against Liverpool's world-class defense? Now, on 13 minutes, Arsenal did turn that dominance into a goal when Zinchenko over on the left-hand side managed to find Martin Odegaard, whose first-time cross fell to the path of Kai Havertz. Havertz failed to divert the ball into the net, and it fell invitingly for Bukayo Saka, who put the ball where it deserved to be. Now, Arsenal were 1-0 up, and Liverpool appeared shaken. They did not show the teeth that we normally would come to expect from a side of Liverpool's quality. And the rest of the first half seemed to continue in that vein, and Arsenal were increasing in both confidence and stature as the game proceeded. Jurgen Klopp's men were uncharacteristically sluggish. They were slow and they were less direct, and most of their play showed it. Arsenal were in the ascendancy, and it came as a huge surprise eventually when Liverpool decided to go back to their roots. A direct pass from Alisson found its way to Gravenberch. Gravenberch then lobbed the ball in the general direction of Luis Diaz, who was being fended off by Saliba. Now, Saliba is one of the best young defenders in the world, and you would have expected him to deal with this ball and possibly shield it and prevent Diaz from getting to it. Now, a certain mix-up occurred between him and Raya, whether Raya was supposed to come for the ball or whether Saliba should have kicked the ball out to touch. Either way, it didn't happen. And Luis Diaz's tenacity was rewarded as he clipped the ball in the general direction of Gabriel, who unwittingly turned the ball into his own net by handling the ball. Now, Liverpool had received some reprieve from this after having no shots on target for pretty much most of the first half. Jurgen Klopp looked as though he was surprised that the ball went in, and Liverpool also were reacting in the same way because they all collectively heaved a sigh of relief rather than looking as though they were a team that were rewarded by actually playing well. And this is something we're not used to seeing from Liverpool. It seemed as though they had paid Arsenal a lot more respect than most times when they do go to the Emirates. And it was very characteristic of the same match that they had in the FA Cup, but this time Arsenal seemed intent and they had a purpose. They had also converted one of their chances in the first half, and with their general play being very good, Jorginho was wonderful in midfield. Odegaard and Saka and Martinelli were attacking, and even Kai Havertz was making a nuisance of himself and causing some problems. Yet Arsenal were still 1-1, and they were going into the break wondering why they didn't have more of a lead. Very similar to the FA Cup game. Liverpool knew that they needed to make a change, and so the second half began in a different fashion. Liverpool had only had about 4 shots in the first half in total, with none of them on target. But within the first 3 minutes of the second half, they had the same amount of shots and they went closer. Jurgen Klopp has been very good of late in making in-game changes, And he knew that with the first half that was as terrible as it was, and with the quality that Liverpool is supposed to serve up, he needed to make a change. So in the first 5 minutes, he let the game continue as it was, and Liverpool did start brightly. However, he decided to make a change in and around 50 minutes. Liverpool needed to make more of their possession of the game, because the game was not off in as far as Liverpool's possession, but it was off as far as what they were doing with the ball. And so the attempt to bring in Elliott was to become more direct. They shifted their backline to more of a 3 in attack. And then they wanted to have on one side Gomez and on the other side Andy Robertson, who had also come in for Trent Alexander-Arnold, to impose themselves much more on Arsenal. But this did not work. And Arsenal kept going forward. They went close with a few chances. First, Martin Odegaard went close, and a little bit later on, Bukayo Saka had a shot that went just wide, and Arsenal were starting to seize more of the initiative. And on 66 minutes, an almost direct replica of the Arsenal debacle that led into the Liverpool goal was reenacted, but this time by Liverpool's own imperious back line, when Virgil van Dijk and Alisson were caught in a muddle after some good play from Gabby Martinelli, who body-checked Van Dijk. He bumped into Alisson, and that prevented him from making the clearance, leaving Martinelli with a clear and open goal, and all he needed to do was slot the ball in the direction of the goal, and Arsenal were now 2-1 up. Liverpool had now found themselves behind to a title rival, and even more so, they find themselves in a position that they're not usually accustomed to, with Arsenal now looking as though they were favorites to win this game. Now, game state would normally dictate that eventually Liverpool would start to get themselves more in the game, and they attempted to do so with the likes of McAllister going very close in 75 minutes with a shot that went just wide. But Arsenal were now looking comfortable, and Liverpool were not looking as they look like in most games when they can potentially come back in. They were not looking as though they were having any answers for what Arsenal did. Arsenal were not superimposing themselves at that point, and they understood that Liverpool were going to have a good share of possession, and they probably expected Liverpool to have some chances. But nothing really came of anything of Liverpool's play, and Arsenal even went close when Kivior found himself desperately close to getting Arsenal 3-1 up, but his header was straight at Alisson. Now, Arsenal were also looking very good in defense, and by this point, they were knowing that they just needed to hold on, and they would be putting themselves back in the title conversation. And so, when Liverpool were on one of their attacks, Arsenal decided to counterattack them, and with Kai Havertz free, he ran past Konate, who blocked him with his hands, and unfortunately, the Liverpool defender got himself a second yellow card. And with that went almost all the hopes that Liverpool had to get themselves back into this game. And now with a depleted back line and with Arsenal on the ascendancy, Arsenal were able to add a third goal, this time through Trossard. He had a really good play over on the left-hand side. He managed to knock the ball ahead of Elliott, run down, and with no feasible option in the middle of the park, he decided to go at it himself. The ball was slightly deflected by Van Dijk in the general direction of the goal, and unfortunately it went in between Alisson's legs, and Arsenal were now home and free. Liverpool were now gone from this game, and it seemed as though it was something you couldn't have imagined, because with all the tenacity that Liverpool tend to show in most of their games, it was unbelievable that they seemed to cower in the Emirates Stadium, and it didn't seem as though this was the Liverpool that we're much used to seeing. I said earlier that Manchester City were probably the ones who are going to be the happier of all the sides with this result, and that's not because Arsenal aren't going to be happy. We are absolutely overjoyed by what happens. But one of the things is that Liverpool in this game at the Emirates were facing one of their more tough away fixtures, and they still have to play City, but the only other fixture that you could think of as being extremely hard for them would quite possibly be a trip to Old Trafford, because in games between Liverpool and Manchester United will make it an imperative for them to beat Liverpool and to quite possibly make sure that they do not give Jurgen Klopp a good send-off. Over on the Manchester City side, they'll be looking at this as Arsenal, who they have had the measure of many times before this season, as being one of their tough games because they have to come to the Etihad, but that means Arsenal are quite possibly looking at a game that's going to be much harder for them to play against. So Liverpool are going to be okay, and they come away from the Emirates slightly bruised. But one thing that was telling in this game is that Arsenal have risen in stature, and that mini dip that they had was definitely going to affect them, but they seem to have overcome it with flying colors. Over on the Manchester City side and the Liverpool side, they will be looking at Arsenal a lot more serious than they quite possibly had been doing in the last couple of weeks. Overall, I do think that this is a very, very good result for Arsenal. It puts us back into the conversation of the title. But if I'm to be completely honest, I still do have Liverpool and Manchester City as favorites above Arsenal. And that is not because I don't have faith in my team, but just because of the realization that Liverpool do have a more forgivable run-in than Arsenal, who still have to go to Tottenham, who still have to go to Old Trafford, and they still have to go to the Etihad. And so when you look at Manchester City, who an away game is not really a problem for them because that's just how good they have been recently, the only joker that you could look at in their run-in would quite possibly be the away fixture at Anfield. And so right now, I still do have Arsenal as third favorites for the title. But one thing that they definitely did do in this game was to put themselves back into the conversation and to still have much more of the respect of the league than they did in previous occasions. The fact that Liverpool offered as much respect to Arsenal shows how far this team has come in the last few years. And with the record that Arsenal have of only 2 victories in 23 meetings against their recent title rivals, this would make them a lot more confident going into games such as the ones at the Etihad or such as the ones at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and finally at Old Trafford. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think. This was a very important victory for Arsenal, one that I am definitely very happy about. But that does not mean that Liverpool are finished. Nowhere in between. Arsenal can be very proud of the performance that they give today, but they also need to temper their expectations by knowing that they do have a couple of very tough away fixtures in their run-in. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. It's been your boy Izzy. Once again, thanking you for the privilege of your viewership. And until the next time, peace.